every Tuesday night. From November on, we get the playoff rankings release that is released by the College Football Selection Committee. So I'll give you the top 10 right here. So we have no change in the top 7. I didn't think there would be. Top 7, yes, correct. LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Bama, Oregon, Utah come in 1 through 7. I don't have any big beef there. I do think the committee backed themselves up against a wall last week by keeping Alabama at 5 after they had just lost to LSU and only dropping them 2 spots. And the big reason was Rob Mullins, the chair of the committee, referenced, because Alabama does not have a good resume. They beat Texas A&M. That's probably their most significant win, and they looked good and they lost. Like I don't think that should garner you a lot of points and a lot of status. But Rob Mullins specifically referenced 2 weeks ago, he said their personnel is some of the best in the country. Now, when he says that, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's got to be their quarterback. Tua is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. That is a part of that personnel. And then when you lose him, are you going to knock them because Tua is out?
That would be in line with what you're saying.
Exactly. But I think the committee always is kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth because they can and they have to justify. It's a hard job. But they want to tell you why teams are ranked. This is where I think Alabama is misranked where they are. And yet I don't think they would have been right in dropping them because Tua was out, because we don't know if Mac Jones is going to be that good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you reserve the right to do that. Like when you set the table for personnel being one of the things. Like right now, you don't know what he's going to look like, what Bama will look like with him at quarterback. But if they come out this week and they're sluggish and they don't look great, bless you. Then next week, you come back and maybe they do fall to 6, and you have one of those Pac-12 teams jump there
them.
And right.
Because I think the optics of it would have looked bad. Ohio State's the best example of why I don't like that the committee takes into consideration injuries at quarterback, because Ohio State in 2014 won a national championship with Cardale Jones, who was their 3rd quarterback of the year. Mm-hmm. So I don't like, because good football teams overcome injuries and they have depth, and we don't know that yet.
Do you imagine at the end of the day, if it holds true to form, let's say the Bama does not drop, they stay at 5th through this whole process, one of those Pac-12 teams goes undefeated the rest of the way and wins the Pac-12. Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship. Bama gets skipped by one of those Pac-12 teams.
I think they should. Now, Bama fans are getting really comfortable at 5, thinking, hey, if that scenario that you unfolded, if Georgia gets beat, we'll just bump in and we're good to go. I think they better be cautious with that one. Now, there is an interesting development, and this is one thing I think that was flawed last night. So I'll kind of bring this full circle. So Penn State is ranked 8th. Minnesota is ranked 10th.
Right.
Which makes no sense to me, because 2 weeks ago they played on the field. Who won that game? Yeah. Minnesota. And yet the committee has Minnesota ranked 2 spots behind Penn State. And you say, well, what was their justification for that? So they referenced common opponents, because Iowa just beat Minnesota. Penn State had beaten Iowa. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, talking out of both sides of their mouth. I would always, if you have 2 teams that have similar resumes where they both have 1 loss, not multiple, but they both have the same amount of losses,
head-to-head
I think head-to-head should matter. Yeah. Like college football is supposed to be unique because the regular season matters. But when you say, hey, we think Penn State's better because they beat Iowa, like that to me is throwing that out the window. Correct. That game's like it didn't even happen. So because they used common opponent, here's where Oregon could potentially, I don't think it'll happen, but this is what Alabama fans are hanging on to. Oregon lost to Auburn.
Yeah.
Alabama has 2 games left, 1 against Western Carolina, 1 against Auburn. If Alabama goes out and beats Auburn convincingly,
yep, there you go.
Then there's your common opponent, criteria that Alabama fans are saying, well, you just used it for Penn State, Minnesota. But I do think there is a massive difference, because Oregon, if they win out, will be a conference champion, which I know is not a requirement, but it is a pretty significant criteria that the committee would look at, and I do think they would value it. Plus, I don't think there's any conspiracy theories. I don't think certain networks try to get the best matchups for, I worked at ESPN, right? I saw how it played out. I don't think there's any pressure placed on them. There are some people that will say, ESPN wants the highest ranked, or the best brand. They would want Alabama in there.
Right.
I do think the more likely scenario is that the conversations in that committee room, those 13 people, I think the one kind of, not conspiracy, but thing that might play, the Pac-12 has been left out the last couple years. Bama's been given the benefit of the doubt multiple times. As a non-conference champ, they got in and won the national championship.
And without Tua, this is the year you can get away with doing that.
And you can make a strong stand saying, hey, conference championships matter. That was the 13th game that Alabama didn't get to play. They didn't even play in their championship game, so we're going to give it to Oregon. So ultimately, I think Alabama fans who think you're in a good spot in 5, I think you're a little bit delusional, because I do think the Pac-12 is in a better spot.
Who did Utah lost to Southern Cal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What if it's
by 3 on the road?
Utah instead of Oregon?
So I think that's actually I think
better?
it's the same. I think it's better
because you don't have the common opponent.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. And their non-conference is a win against BYU on the road, which is a pretty good win for Utah. Right. And I think Utah actually, I picked Oregon. I want to be right, so I'm rooting for Oregon to win out. But Utah's defense is playing really good football. They're actually the top 3 defenses in college football. I want to double check this, but I think it's Ohio State, it's Clemson, and it's Utah. Just want to confirm this in total defense. Yes, I'm correct. Ohio State number 1, Clemson number 2, Utah number 3. I think that's another metric that the committee would look at, because they use metrics. They would say Utah is really impressive. That might even be the best case for the Pac-12, where there wouldn't be any certainty. If Utah wins out, beats Oregon, I think Utah would be a no-brainer in there, which would not be a 1. Here's the thing that's unique about Alabama. Traditionally been one of those dominant defenses. They are 27th in the country in total defense. So they're not as dominant as they've always been, which is why I think this year is completely different than when they did get in and won the national championship.
And that's why the subtraction of Tua weighs that much more into the conversation.
Exactly.
You in theory, you can't withstand the loss of that, because you're going to be that much better than someone defensively.
Exactly. I think last night, again, it continues to kind of be bad news for the Big 12. Oklahoma beat Baylor, the crazy game, coming back from 28-3. They're ranked 9th now. The Big 12 has kind of battered itself up a little bit. Now, they've got some pretty good teams, but I don't think beating Baylor again in a championship game is going to resonate with the committee. It's not going to be some sort of signature move. The most, and this one will drive me the craziest, is if you see LSU face Georgia in the SEC championship game and Georgia beats LSU, I think you're going to see Georgia and LSU both get in. That's assuming Georgia wins out. Now, Georgia's got a pretty good test this weekend against Texas A&M.
Okay.
It's at home. I think they win, but I think it'll be a tough test. But I think you would see LSU, who would have just lost, still get into the playoff, which I hate. I don't like the optics of it. Playoffs, to me, are supposed to be about win your way in, but LSU's resume is so impressive. Beating Bama, beating Texas, beating Florida, beating all these teams, that's a pretty significant
I don't love
resume.
the optics of it either, but I wouldn't mind that, because they have run through this season, and they've been the best team almost all year long. They've got the most impressive resume. If they were to get tripped up at the wire, I don't know that just because it was at the wire, I would take away their opportunity to win a championship. When if it had been earlier in the season to a really high-ranked team, they have worked their way back into the conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I think the timing of it would keep me off of LSU at that point, even though I agree with you, the optics could be a little dicey.
And the thing is, I think you can make this. It's not. You can never assume in college football. But I think LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson are going to win out. I think Ohio State, Clemson, I think I probably believe in the most because of the weakness of the opponents. Mm-hmm. Ohio State has a gauntlet. They got to go through Penn State this weekend, then they have to go to Ann Arbor to play Michigan, and then they have to go probably through Minnesota, who's a pretty good opponent. Like, they got 3 tests. I think it's a little bit dicey. I think they should win, but it's not a lock. LSU, pretty easy remainder of the season. They do face Texas. Texas A&M kind of is a thing that could throw a wrench into all these plans.
Except they lose to everybody who, like...
Yes, that's good. Yeah, so that's kind of been what they've been. But I feel pretty confident. Like, if there was a bet you could make over LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson making the playoffs, all 3 of them, I would take it. Right. I think it would be pretty good value there. Joey, what's up? You got a question?
Yeah, do you think that, let's say Ohio State wins out, they're going to be number 1 at the end of the year. Do you think that LSU being 2, if they lose to Georgia, they'll be 2 at the time. Will that make any impact on them possibly dropping out? Instead of dropping them from 1 to out, they'd be dropping from 2 to out. Since we don't really know what the committee looks at anyways, it's just harder to drop the number 1 team 4 spots. Maybe you're dropping the number 2 team 3 spots and someone jumps them.
Yeah, you make a good point because I agree with you. I think, well, I don't know. I think Ohio State, LSU's defense, speaking of defense, their defense is really struggling right now. I think
they gave up almost like 50 last week.
No, they gave up 38, but they gave up 600 yards of total offense, and the quarterback rushed for 200 yards against them. They are all the way down at 47th in the country. Now, you've never seen a team in the college football playoff with a defense outside of the top 25 win a national championship.
Right.
So I think that's becoming a liability for LSU. I think that's a problem for them. But Joey brings up a good. I do think Ohio State might jump them there, and it would be a little bit easier. The thing I think the committee would try to avoid as far as the ranking setup, I don't think they want to see a rematch right away of LSU Georgia. So maybe they try to separate them, but I still think they'd both be in. And because of the weakness, the Pac-12 is not great. Oregon or Utah. Oregon has one win over a top 25 team, and it's USC. Utah has none. So they don't have the resume is that great. I know all this is supposed to be great. The conversation, the controversy. I hate it. I think it's such a sham. I hate our the way that college football determines a champion. I think it's the single dumbest thing in all of sports because it is controversial.
Sure.
But and it was designed this way. When you have 5 Power 5 conferences and you only have 4 spots, you are going to screw over a conference champion every single year, and some years too.
So what should we do, Danny?
Go to 8. Damn it. Let's do it. Go to 8 teams. I'd get up there and pound the table for it. Even 6, I think would be a good compromise. Right. Let's go to 6. 5 Power 5 conference champs, and let's have one wild card. If it's Bama this year, if it's Ohio State another year, some worthy team.
Yeah, if Notre Dame pops up.
Yeah, slipped up, had a close loss like Alabama did to LSU, then let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's put them in there. But the current system, I hate it because it screws over players.
I want to ask you a quick question it's got to do with college football, but it's not about the playoffs.
What's up?
But I watch all this stuff going on now surrounding Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
And, him taking over and his coach saying he's kind of revolutionizing the game and so on and so forth. And I watched that Baylor Oklahoma game.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts a year ago this time his stock was as low as it could get, probably.
Correct.
Right?
I don't think he was getting drafted a year ago.
Right. That's we were talking about maybe him needing to change position, right?
Yes.
And staying at Bama and being isn't he exactly what the NFL is looking for at this point? He runs well. You have to imagine his athleticism. While it might not be Lamar, it's certainly not Baker. He is running the ball and making really good college football athletes look pedestrian. So he's going to be able to run it, and he's throwing it a lot better than he had a bad first half in that game against Baylor, but he redeemed himself in the second half. Doesn't he fit the mold of what they're looking for now in the NFL?
He absolutely does. I think he's played his way into a much better draft position.
Right.
I don't think he's going to be first round.
What is the knock on him at this point? And I'm just curious. I'm not defending him.
I think he's a really good runner.
Yeah.
I don't think he's Lamar Jackson. But I think he's better than Baker, and he's better than Joe Burrow or anybody else.
Yeah.
I think he's a really good passer, but I don't think he's Joe Burrow. I don't think he's Baker or Kyler Murray.
Got it.
I think he's good at both, but he's not elite in one or the other. And at some point, I do think playing at Oklahoma is almost going to become a knock because you become a product of the system.
Right.
Well, Lincoln Riley's this great coach, puts you in good positions, and you can do these types of things because he's having a phenomenal year. I mean, the efficiency's off the charts. He might even statistically be better than Kyler or Baker Mayfield.
If I was a general manager,
you would take him right now.
No, I'm not saying first round. I'm saying that I would be if I could watch him slip to a point where I've addressed my needs, in the first round, and he's sitting around and maybe even I don't know where he's going to go, but if he's the second round pick, I am licking my chops at getting a chance at that because I actually disagree with his athleticism because he played in the SEC.
Yep.
He played with Bama, and he was running all around. Now he didn't have the opportunities that Lamar did because Lamar was the show at Louisville. No, I'm not saying that he's electric. I'm not saying that he's Lamar. But I am saying that he is if you give me 4 classes. There are 2 classes below Lamar before you get to Kyle Allen. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's in the class right above Kyle Allen. He's in the class right below Lamar. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's the way I see his ability to run the ball. And I think he's made a lot of strides in the passing game, and it didn't start at Oklahoma.
Right.
It started last year with Dan Enos and them at Alabama.
Let's not forget, as a freshman, he was SEC Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
He still had an incredible career, regardless of what happened to Bama, and now is happening at Oklahoma. He's gotten better, and he's played himself into getting drafted, which is the best.
I'm not trying to champion for his cause. I just think that's really interesting when you see all this Lamar talk.
Yes.
And a year ago, that dude we were talking about him changing positions.
Right.
Yeah.
No, he's definitely played himself into an opportunity, and that's all you should want. Now you want to get the highest payday. I think he'll creep up the longer people get to look at him and dissect his film because it has been impressive for sure.